All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Hey, I'm Tash. I'm VP of Customer Growth at Hook and the host of this webinar, The Monthly Think. Today, we're talking all about building business cases for technology. And I'm thrilled to have two incredible guests joining me today to help us navigate this topic, Kristen and Chad. Welcome, Kristen. Welcome, Chad. Would you care to give a quick intro if that's okay? Kristen, I'll pass to you first.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Campitas, and I'm the Director of Customer Strategy and Operations at Vimeo. And so for us, that means supporting the process, data, tools, enablement for our post-sale teams from implementation, customer success, and our renewal managers.
Nice. Thank you. And Chad, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here, Tosh and Kristen. So, Chad Wonderling, I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Zone& Company. And previously, I was in a prior life, in fact, a Hook customer and have been at the intersection for quite some time of purchasing and selling software. So great to be here. Thank you.
Nice, thank you. And I love that we've got two totally different perspectives here on this webinar today. And it's such an important topic for revenue leaders, specifically because a lot of leaders that we're speaking to, it might be their first time ever building a business case. And so we're thinking a lot about how do you build these really solid business cases so that we can get the investments that we need into the post-sales teams to hit our goals. But I think also there's this other perspective of looking at this that's, hey, also we spend a lot of time building business cases with our customers to stay with us or to expand with us. And so this concept of a business case and what a great business case looks like is really, really relevant to a lot of people. So let's start from the very beginning. Why is it really important to have a business case when you're trying to invest in tech? And I think, Chad, for this one, I'll come over to you.
Yeah, there's a few different levels of this, but I think at the end of the day is like there are so many options and there's so many things to consider out there in the market. And at some point I'll get through kind of like a checklist. But I think really what's very critical is, like, at least from the finance perspective, is we're all very aware of the, I'll call it the investment, as we think about the ROI. But I think sometimes what can be often understated is the return. So I think balancing those two things, I think, is very critical. And then I think even more holistically, when it comes to business cases, it's like, what does this mean in terms of, like in this particular case, what does this mean in terms of revenue retention, which can be really hard to measure, and even quantify. But $1 retained revenue is $1 that you don't have to go out and acquire, which makes a big difference. So those are just some initial foundational things that we can get into more details on.
Yeah, I love that. And before we come into then what a great business case consists of, I think let's think a little bit earlier than that. Like, where does it start building a great business case? Does it start at putting your pen to paper and trying to figure your metrics out? Kristen, what do you think? What's your perspective there?
It starts way long before you actually start to create the actual business case. I think initially you're going to start with what your teams are needing. And I really like this idea that customer experience really starts with the employee experience, or some leaders like ENPS. And you'll likely hear a lot of those signals of how your teams are struggling to do their jobs. And it kind of starts there, and what insights that they're looking to get that they don't have, or the types of tasks that they do that are difficult, and what's taking up more of their time with that they're not spending with customers. Often it'll start with that. And then I think even before going out and procuring new technology, so an approach I've always taken is trying to build within and trying to understand what we have at our disposal to help kind of lay a foundation for what the business case could eventually look like. So I'm thinking, what are the processes that need to be put into place that are very low cost? What are the tools already in your tech stack that you can be leveraging bits and pieces of to start satisfying some of those employee pain points, to begin then formulating, we're doing what we can with what we have, and then being able to measure where we still want to go, and how purchasing a platform might help with that.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like from your perspective, it's not just thinking about before you build it, the metrics that you're going to influence, but it's thinking about the employee experience and how you're going to influence that too. And like laying some of that groundwork before you go ahead and build your business case. Chad, is
That's
there
right.
anything else that from like your perspective, you think before you sit down and try to build your business case that you should have a good handle on?
Yeah, I think it's really all about, I think with the business case is it's really all about defining the problem. And I think it's what is the business problem that we're trying to solve? Because I think if you can efficiently and effectively define that problem, that is really the first step. And it's what I like to call kind of like business drivers, or what are things in the business absent of any technology and anything from the outside world, what are those business drivers that need to be solved? And I think if you can effectively define what that business problem is, that is the first step to putting together a really strong business case.
I love that. Well, then, speaking of strong business cases, Chad, I'm sure that you've reviewed and approved or maybe declined a few business cases in your time. Tell us a little bit about how do we get to yes? Like, what's the makeup of a great business case that gets presented to a finance team?
Yeah, and I think if we think through the lens of software first, there's nothing that I'm going to speak for the business that the business hates more and that the CFO hates more in a business than software that is not used, that is not fully adopted, that was implemented poorly or incorrectly, or that just simply sits on the shelf. So I think, as we think about after defining the problem of the business case, and as we think about applying solutions to it, specifically with software, kind of like my six, I'll call it like six rule criteria in order to get to yes, which can be very qualitative, but then work in some of the quantitative pieces is we want a software that is holistic, that can think holistically. So something that might track across the customer experience or the customer life cycle. We want to think holistically with our solutions, not in isolation. Okay. And then what we also want to do is we want to consolidate. We want to be thoughtful when we're making a decision about a possible solution. It's probably going to impact some of the other existing solutions that we have. So we need to consolidate strategically and thoughtfully. So I think in terms of that, I often think of more tools leading to more friction. And we want to remove friction, at least from the finance side, across the business as we enable the business. And then I think thirdly is, as we think about applying solutions, kind of the rule of thumb is we're probably not the first ones that have ever experienced this problem before. And so then let's benchmark up. So as we think about growing, as we think about scaling, what works now might not work in 2-3 years from now with wherever we're going. So how can we be sure that we're benchmarking up, whether it's against our peer class, someone that's encountered this problem before? That's third. Fourthly is, again, hate shelfware. We want adoption, is we want to favor adoption over complexity. So as we think about solutions that would look to solve a business problem, is it's all about adoption and how can we drive adoption, because that's a big indicator of time to value. Okay. Number 5 is we want to plan for scale. So as we think about benchmarking up, driving scalability, we want to make sure that the tool and solution that we're thinking about can handle 10x what we're doing today. Okay, that we can really grow with it. Okay, because then it's gonna drive more value. And then I think in this current time that we're in terms of the 6th item is if we are applying solutions to business problems and not considering AI readiness and not prioritizing AI readiness, we are being negligent. And so we always have to consider and prioritize an element of AI readiness and how these solutions, whatever they are that we're looking to apply, put AI at the forefront. And so those are kind of my 6 criteria as I think through kind of my checklist with the business and partner across with the business as we look to solve problems. And I think it's just a good kind of qualitative consideration and checklist for anybody within any function.
Yeah, I love that. And I think some of the 6 are more self-explanatory. Could I ask you a couple of questions on a couple of them to make sure that everyone listening like really understands the ins and outs of it? You mentioned like holistically, how does this fit in? When you say that, do you mean like how does this piece of tech play with other pieces of tech in our stack, and like how does it integrate and piece together?
That's right.
Okay, nice.
A tool isn't valuable on its own. So like the day of point solutions, which I think is a day of the past, they're no longer a full value. And so it's really about how can these solutions integrate with other software and other tools that are critical for running our business. And so the question is does this work with everything else that we use as we think
Nice.
about it? Yeah.
Okay, amazing. And then this piece around benchmark up, how do I showcase that it could suit our needs in the future and it could help us scale? I absolutely love, and like personally have never thought about when putting a business case together. If I'm a revenue leader and I'm coming to you, how do I prove that out? Is that a conversation with you in advance to say, hey, like what kinds of things should I be stress testing this tech against to make sure it fits with our business in 3 or 5 years time? Or perhaps as a revenue leader, how do I understand what I have to stress test so that I can include that in the business case?
Yeah, I didn't get this thought until probably just now, but I think even going back to Kristen's analogy of people,
Mm,
I mean, when you're considering a software tool and when you're looking to solve a business problem and you see software as a very viable solution, bringing on a software tool is really not much different than hiring a new employee. Meaning that when you think about all the interviews that we put employees through, as we
mm,
think about acquiring a software tool, just like with employees that we hire, we're going to do some reference checks. And so, the thing that I always like to think about as we're considering a software solution is let's consider some references. Let's speak to some references, not only just to hear from them, but I want to see what were their problems a year or two ago, or what was their problems 3 years ago, and then where are they now, and what was their journey, and how did they navigate their path? Because it's you learn 2 ways: from your own experience or from the experience of others. And if you can learn from the experience of others, the faster you're going to be able to move um, more effectively.
yeah, I love that. There's so many good nuggets in there. And then the last piece I want to dig into, and Kristen, I want to get your opinion on this too. This AI readiness piece, I think, is so interesting. And obviously, I'm sure Chad like relatively new one of your 6 criteria in the grand schemes of your career. We're seeing AI become more prevalent in the market. Some companies are being really intentional about how they leverage AI to solve a problem. Other companies are just bolting on AI because that's the thing that's cool that everybody needs to do right now. And so as we think about this business case and AI readiness, how do you stress test for that in your business case? Like, how do you think about what's true AI readiness and what's at the core of a piece of tech versus what's just a bolt on because AI is cool now? I don't know if either of you have an opinion on that. Kristen, you're on mute. Sorry.
Oh, you mean
I have an opinion from an evaluation standpoint, because I think that in that case, it's quite easy at this point, or it's becoming easier to understand when platforms are using AI in a very central way and then building around that versus they have a central concept and are building AI into the peripheral. And I think that gets a little bit to the heart of this. And I think too, honestly, our hook evaluation, which is very somewhat recent, and seeing how Hook is approaching AI from a very central standpoint of the model being first and then the workflows being built around it. That was different than what we were seeing with other CS tools. And it did set Hook apart from others. And so I kind of, as kind of the internal champion, I saw that as part of, one, what immediately got our executives' attention. I think that was quite natural to get that attention. And then also on me to understand and help communicate that what that like centralness of the AI, how that helps the return that Chad was thinking about or talking about earlier, and how that'll help us offset costs very initially at the start. I think that when AI is kind of being built on the peripheral of tools, it can take a longer time to adopt versus or put workflows into place versus the opposite. So that's just as we were evaluating kind of where we were able to spot how AI was being built into some of the more legacy CS tools that we were using versus some folks that were thinking about it differently.
Yeah, awesome. And so, Kristen, what else is on your hit list of how to build a great business case, how to get to a yes? Anything else that you would add on to what Chad had said?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of very like simple tactical things to do, and one pertains to the benchmarking up that usually when you're asking to invest in a new piece of software, there's something that you're also willing to give up, and that goes back to also the offset costs and really being very plain about pointing out where you can be offsetting internal costs, whether that is replacing another piece of software, consolidating. I mean, being in the SaaS company, like in the SaaS world ourselves at Vimeo, now we know that consolidation is a large trend. So consolidation means a lot when it comes to making a business case. How can you reduce your tech stack by replacing? And then also, I loved the analogy of building or purchasing a piece of software is like hiring a new person, because in our case, sometimes bringing on a piece of software means alleviating an entire team of a project that's taking up a lot of time that they're perhaps building in-house versus being able to purchase. So there's always this buy versus build debate that happens internally and that should be happening and pointed out in a business case as well. So I think that good business cases or successful business cases from my experience have been ones that also are very honest with what I'm willing to do the work to help reduce costs of as well.
Yeah, wonderful. And also, let's say we've built an incredible business case. We've hit on all of those points. We've got some really great metrics that prove the R in the ROI, so the return on the investment and how it's going to solve a big business problem. What do you do next? Like, you've put it all together, Kristen. Like, where do you take it now? Does it go straight to finance? Do you take it elsewhere first? What are your steps?
No, I wish, but I do think that the easiest way to get to yes is to also build your internal champions. And I think we do that quite a bit, knowing that, during evaluation stages, you also get to begin understanding what will it take to implement, getting ahead of that kind of rocky implementation and instilling people like Chad with confidence that an implementation won't go off without a hitch also requires that you have internal champions that'll help you out with whatever those needs are. So for us, I'll use our hook evaluation as an example of something really tactical. We had a lot of conversations with our data teams, with our data champions, with the people who would be partnering with us on the day-to-day to help scope out their work as well. Because purchasing and getting the business case approved is the first step. Getting that to a place where it's returning the first year is really, really important in that. And the implementation is really, really important in then proving out that return. And if you don't have your champions on board prior to actually getting the sign off, that becomes more at risk.
And Chad, from your perspective, is that something that you're like stress testing when a business case comes to you, or is it just a signal that perhaps you've heard about this from other people other than the main person putting the case together, and it's a sign that other people internally in the business are talking about this and are on board? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that Kristen said there that are great is like, you're not just really buying software, you're actually selling it internally. And I think that that's a real key thing to understand. Because if you think about the 6 criteria that I walked through, is that in order to really have success, you're it's going to be a very cross-functional project to go about the implementation, time to value. It's going to be very, very cross-functional. So you're going to have to get those alliances, those partnerships internally. And then I think the other thing too that Kristen alluded to is you've got to, as you thinking about the business cases, you've got to plan ahead, because there's nothing that I poke holes in any more than someone running to me and then telling me all of a sudden that they need something when they didn't plan ahead for it. So I think plan ahead, begin that process of almost socializing and building out that case well in advance through partners, cross-functional team members, because in order to set yourself up for software and solution success, you're gonna need to rely on the help of others.
Yeah, I love that. All right, last question from me. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, please throw them in the Q&A now. But let's imagine where we've done this whole process perfectly. We've primed the business, we've socialized the idea, we know the business problem we're trying to solve, we've ticked off all of the 6 key criteria of building a really great business case. We know what we're willing to give up, and we've taken this to champions internally. We're bringing this really solid business case over to finance, and finance says no, which never happens, but of course it does happen. Kristen, what do you do then? Like, you've put all this effort in, you've built this case, you believe so much in the business case, you believe in the tech. Like, what do you do if you get a no?
I mean, I get no's all the time. I think a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that timing is really important, especially, I mean, Chad can confirm, especially in the financial world where, there can be a better time or not to either take a case or get the case approved. And then, so I would say that timing is important, but also not being afraid to ask for the feedback of where those holes might be, and attempting to go back to the drawing board to understand where your case might be soft, or where you might need to kind of build your knowledge of the case to then go back to going back to the actual pen to paper eventually. And it may be that, processes aren't matured enough, or the prioritization of the effort isn't right at the moment, and 3 quarters down the line it might be. So I think being flexible in the sense that, today's priority is not going to be next year's priority, and so that the case may be service to the top in time. And then I heard something really brilliant. I cannot take credit for this, but the other day that was about customer success, specifically having to think like a customer, but communicate like a CFO. That kind of customer success teams internally have that kind of burden of translation. I think that the reason why I bring this up in this answer is because, like, are there things that maybe you were kind of qualitatively communicating from a customer perspective, and that can be very emotional and emotionally driven sometimes, but then thinking about how was your translation of that into the numbers, and how was your translation into the return. So again, can't take credit for the concept, but I think it relates to the answer to this question.
I love that. Think like a customer, speak like a CFO.
Communicating like a CFO, yeah.
Communicate like a CFO. I love that. Well, both of you have been absolutely wonderful. There have been tons of nuggets in there that are going to help lots of people build business cases. But I think also just really, really good insight for us as post-sales teams as to what happens on the other side, perhaps when you're speaking with a customer who's building a business case to renew or to expand as well. I can't see any questions in the Q&A, so we're going to wrap there. And I'm going to say a massive thank you, Chad. A massive thank you, Kristen. Anyone who's listening, please do follow us on LinkedIn and sign up to the next webinar in a few weeks' time. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your day. And Kristen and Chad, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Tash.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.